All right, thank you. And welcome to the October meeting of the Education Standards Committee. We are going to start with a update on literacy, of course. And so first and foremost, am excited to be continuing to move the work forward with Aussie, who is convening the task force, and will have that workflow that really in large part was advocated for and pushed for by this committee, and continue moving that forward. I got to attend the NASB Early Literacy Working Group recently, and was reminded of how much we can learn from other states and what they have already done in similar contexts, and what data we can look at to assess what interventions we should fund and invest in as well. Several of our board members will be at the Wildflower Academy in Phoenix, Arizona on October 26th for the NASB conference. And so lots to learn from other states, and lots of work for DC to do moving literacy forward. No immediate to-dos for this committee until we hear more from the task force from Aussie. So I will pass over to Mr. Zhu to talk about, give an update on our work around social studies, on all standards revision, and establishing a state process for reviewing and revising standards.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Chang. President Sutter, did you want to provide any quick updates or notes just related to the Aussie piece? I know you had shared this at the working session, just related to Representative Chang and the Aussie Early Literacy Working Group and the plans for the meeting.
Sure. So we had a meeting yesterday, and thanks for having me. We had a meeting yesterday with Aussie leadership. Had the chance to hear from Superintendent Grant that the Aussie working group has nearly all of their members named, including you, Representative Chang, who we will formally nominate for confirmation tomorrow night. And they are simply waiting on one last confirmation notice from the chairman. And once they have that in hand, they will begin to plan for the working group. They have selected a vendor who will be facilitating that work. So that last other piece is in place, and I expect we'll be hearing more from them very soon. I can't remember whether or not we were told that that vendor was public, so I won't name them here, but they have been selected and are ready to begin working, and they expect that they'll be kicking that off later this fall.
Okay.
Anything
Mr.
else you
Zhu?
wanted me to share from that conversation, Mr. Zhu?
No, I think that was the information that I think was helpful. Thank you.
So may I also kick it back to one of you to talk about the Aussie SBOE meeting on social studies standards from October 17th, yesterday?
Sure. Provide the update.
Go ahead, Jessica.
There, if you'd like. So yesterday in that same meeting with Aussie, we talked about the social studies standards. We were notified by Aussie that they have a completed draft of the K through 2 standards. They're still working to finalize 3 through 5, 6 to 8, and the high school standards. They expect that they will have a complete draft ready for public review by mid-December. They also noted that there will be a national panel of experts who will be invited concurrently to review the standards. They're seeking to make that sort of a cross-partisan, cross-ideological set of scholars to take a look at the standards and provide commentary to go alongside the general public commentary. They also noted that they have onboarded and begun working with their own social studies specialist who came to us from DCPS, so is already familiar with DC's context and our standards as they currently exist, as well as the current curriculum in use in our largest LEA, DCPS. So we're very excited to begin working with that new staffer and to be continuing on with Aussie through the month of December for the public release and comments on the standards. Mr. Zhu, if I'm forgetting anything else, I'll turn it back to you.
I don't think you're forgetting anything else, President Sutter. I know you had noted this, I think at the working session for the record, but it might also be good to note just related to the spring 2023 timeline that OSSI had shared via their testimony at the literacy hearing.
Yes, good call. So OSSI noted in their public government witness testimony to the council at the literacy hearing that they would put forth a final draft of standards incorporating public comment for state board vote in spring of 2023. That's another delay from what we'd talked about, but it seems to be a timeline they have committed to since they gave that to the council. On that same front, we did raise in our meeting, mine and Vice President Thompson's, with the Deputy Mayor for Education, questions about how the district is preparing for the release and planned vote for such standards in what might be a different national political environment, specifically a different congressional political environment. So Dr. Paul Kine, the Deputy Mayor for Education, agreed to get back to us at our November meeting to talk more about what the executive team is planning for any sort of contingency plans that might need to be made to make sure that the business of the state, of the District of Columbia, is able to be carried out by its lawmakers, its policymakers, without interference by Congress. So that's our hope, and we'll see how that goes.
Are there any actionable steps that you would advise us to take at this point, President Sutter, as a committee?
At this time, I don't think so, but if you have names of individual scholars that you would like, or other national experts that you would like OSSI to consider including in that panel, please go ahead and share them with myself and Alex, and we'll make sure those get to the team at OSSI. So folks across the ideological spectrum, folks with particular areas of focus, geography, politics, civics, history, go ahead and send those our way if you've got names, and we'll make sure they get to OSSI.
Great, thank you. I have one point of clarification just on process. When we transition, when are committee chairs reappointed, re-voted on? When does that leadership role change?
So typically that would change after the vote for leadership in January. So
Okay.
The January public meeting is when new leadership is selected. And then typically new leadership seeks to establish committees and committee chairs and members in February.
Okay, super, thank you. So this committee will no longer have the two attendees, President Sutter and Representative Wattenberg. So I think we'll have some revising of this makeup. So we'll excited to continue working from this committee to do the work around literacy and standards revisions, and appreciate everything that the two of you have brought to this committee. I have no other points for today if there are no actionable steps. So Mr. Zhu.
Just because I think we quickly glossed over it, but just by way of the second agenda item around establishing the process for review and revision of standards, I did just want to provide an update on where we're at with the hiring for our education standards specialist. Over this month, we've been internally reviewing applicants for that role, doing phone interviews. And this week we started to do some in-person finalist interviews. And so we hope to have someone on board in that education standards specialist role, hopefully mid-November or so. I think in an ideal world, possibly the same start date or time as our incoming executive director might be good too. So that's our goal with that. And also I know Representative Wattenberg is on the call, and I will note during the last meeting, Representative Wattenberg, you did raise making sure or asking some questions related to early reading and literacy as far as the hiring process goes. And I did just want to let you know that type of questioning has been included in our finals interview. So making sure that we're getting a pulse of that too.
Super. Thank you. So I think, just echoing what I said at our working session, it seems like in other ways, besides the ways that we've named currently, the ball is in Aussie's court for both the literacy work that we have been pushing for and the revision work with social studies standards. So just want to make sure that we're all on the same page there, and we'll have more work to be done once we hear back from them. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And now that I think about this, President Sutter, I know there was something raised during the Aussie meeting around another set of standards. Would it be appropriate to share that right now, or do you want to wait?
No, I think that's fine. So the other point that was raised by Aussie is that during our working session meeting, the student representatives raised some concerns that Aussie noted about the current health standards, both with respect to the way social media is handled and with respect to the way sexual education is handled. And so in addition, Councilmember Pinto, in her recent in the Budget Support Act legislation around menstruation and period products, had included language about a need for an update to the health standards around facts and information on menstruation. So Aussie wanted to make sure the board was aware that in order to be responsive to that legislation, as well as to questions from the students, they are planning a supplemental guide specifically focused on menstruation and curriculum, et cetera, related to that. However, they're part of a multi-state working group, sounds a little bit like our NASB groups that we're part of, around updating health standards. They compared it as most similar to the science standards, the next generation science standards. So a similar working group across states that they're working with on health standards. And they expected some point in the future. They did not get more specific than that, but I would imagine sometime in the next, let's call it year or two, they would approach the board with a question about updating the health standards. So just something I think for this committee and for the board staff to keep an eye on, as this will likely transition across perhaps multiple iterations of board cohorts.
Great. No, that makes sense. And so one question I have, a procedural question with this new hire of the education standards specialist. Would they be not only helping to develop new standards based on specific themes, but also thinking through a process through which we revise standards and the frequency to which, or, when it's legislated through council, then we take this on this way, or, when it's been 10 years, then we take it on this way, right? Is that something that role will also help us think about?
Yes, that's my hope and intention, Representative Chang. And I think from the beginning of the conversations that I've had with prospective candidates and our finals candidates, I've made it very clear that in the District of Columbia, we don't have a codified process, whether it is between the office of the state superintendent and us, or even legislated. And so anybody coming into this role would be responsible for helping us as a district and as a state to get to a place where we can have a more regular cadence by which we're actually doing this review, and kind of bring in that lens into the work, right? When we're thinking about what standards are next, like how are we going to do it? And so that would definitely be a task in charge of them.
Super. Thank you very much. So then if there's want to open up to see if there's any other.
I have one thing. So without getting into the difficulties of it, I think one of the things this board has really agreed on has been reading. And one of the things I've been trying to do is before this board changes, is to have sort of unanimous resolution from the board in favor of sort of strong early reading and strong background knowledge. And I wonder, President Sutter, if you might have an idea about what such a resolution or document could look like, since I have clearly failed to accomplish that.
So Representative Wattenberg, I will admit that I do not recall at this moment previously hearing from you a desire to have a resolution that codified those as priorities of the board. I apologize if it happened in a committee meeting that I missed. That may well be on me. I want to say that I would ask my colleagues on the board whether they are in favor of such a resolution even being brought forward, because I am cautious about seeking to tie the hands of a set of newly elected officials to priorities of outgoing elected officials. I certainly think that because the work of social studies and early literacy is already before the board, because that is also resting with OSSI and is work in process, I think in some ways we have to trust that it's going to continue, right? There is a literacy work task force. Council has already taken this up. So can you help me better understand why you think it needs to be codified in a resolution and what specifically you want it to say?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I want it codified is typically that is how boards pass on the learning that they've done so that the next board can build on what they've done. If the next board wants to change it, they change it. But the point is that there has been a group of people who have thought a lot about it and who have done stuff on it and want to pass it down. They want to establish for the public that that's where they are and pass it on to the next board. I think that's a very typical way to do it. We've done it, you know, it exists in a lot of other resolutions. I mean, we've clarified where we stand on teacher turnover. We've clarified where we stand on a school report card. We've et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's an important thing to do, and I don't know why we wouldn't do it on reading. So that's why I think we should do it.
So I want to understand. I joined the board 4 years ago, and I knew that the work of the board had involved teacher retention because the board had been doing that research. Right, there was a line of research. There were prior resolutions. I did not, as an incoming board member, receive a list of prior board priorities for my consideration. My colleagues informally explained that to me. I learned it through meetings. So what I'm wondering is there something that you think means our board current cohort should do something differently than say happened for the last 2 cohorts? Because I don't know if Representative Chang wants to speak to this, but we also didn't do something like that for Representative Chang's incoming cohort. Like, we didn't have a list of here are current board priorities that we're seeking to continue for your consideration.
I'm not proposing a list of priorities that we hand over, but absolutely, when you came in, when I came in, there was a record of the work of previous boards. There's a record of the reports that they had, the legislation they introduced, the resolutions they passed, and it captures what they thought was important, what they learned about it, and what they think. And I am proposing.
I guess that's what I'm saying. Is I think we have that.
An argument. I don't understand. I don't get it.
I apologize if it appears that I'm attempting to argue. I assure you I am not. What I'm trying to clarify is I do not think we have done that via our existing work. Is there a reason we should pass a resolution that specifically says something rather than resting on the body of our work?
Well, I don't even understand the question. I mean, first of all, the way a public board shows what it thinks is through adopting public resolutions. That's what it does. So I don't understand why that's controversial. And also the body of work includes resolutions. So
So may I jump in here? I think I'm thinking of the resolution that we have been working on in Dr. O'Leary's committee, which is much more of a, you know, here's what the evidence, here are evidence-based practices that the board agrees on, right? That would, we've been working on teacher turnover. These are not, it's no longer a hypothesis that certain investments will improve how things work. We have studied this, we've commissioned studies for this, we know this at the national level. There is a similar world where I can see it just naming some of those best practices that I think I hear you, Representative Wattenberg, saying of, here are the evidence-based ways of reading instruction, right? That knowledge and Natalie Wexler's way of describing this is I find really powerful, right? Knowledge needs to be in the picture. My challenge there is I think it is it could be a redundant sort of and maybe that's helpful, actually, repetition of OSCE's comprehensive literacy plan, which is, for all intents and purposes, quite a thorough literature review of best practices that includes that as well. Or, right, it would be a much more explicit ask of that I don't currently feel prepared to do before the task force meets, which is council should legislate, or OSCE should fund all LEAs too, right? And so there is this I think back to the work of the informal group that I got Ethan's help with to convene with informally, right, getting stakeholders from all the different acronyms to come together and come up with some policy recommendations that I hope will feed into the work that the task force does. I think I'm trying to think through what is the best way. My ultimate goal is, how do we actually make the most now that we've been pushing for this task force and pushing for the task force to work on specific things, right? As well, to do that in the most effective way. And so am open, right, to a letter or to a resolution. And I don't know what other tools are at our disposal, but I can also see it being either a echoing of the comprehensive literacy plan, a precursor to, but I also don't want to bind my hands in the as a representative to the task force, right? And maybe it's actually an effective tool to say, hey, here are sorry for these inchoate ideas. I'm just thinking out loud with you now. I'm processing verbally with you. Here are the recommendations that, but it wasn't a board thing, right? That the recommendations and vision that I had collected from stakeholders was not necessarily something that we did together as a committee. So let me think about this, Representative Wattenberg, if I may. I think I want to make sure that it is something, I mean, very tactically, I would like it to be something that can move the task force forward, given the timing. And I can see some things that could help do that, but let me think on it. I think
it should be something that's helpful to you. What I would say is that our board is uniquely, I would say almost uniquely in the country, united on these two issues. It is something that causes lots of consternation in lots of other places. And I think it's looking back, I regret that we didn't do more on it. But we were all doing other things and different things. And I want to help set the table for you to take that forward. And
I appreciate that. Really, thank you.
That's sort of what I'm after here. I think it's a shame to just lose that. We don't know what comes next. You're moving forward on it. So like I say, I'm up for whatever people come up with. I think it's important to get us all on the record for that. So.
Mr. Zhu?
Yeah, I just an observation. I mean, I think one thing that this committee is both fortunate and not fortunate about is, yes, Representative Wattenberg, President Sutter, Representative Parker are all members that will not be on this committee or the board, but Representative Chang is not leaving, right? Like Representative Chang does still have 2 years left on his term. And I think with that, he will bring forward, I think, this discussion and passion about literacy and the work that the board has been doing over these past 2 years. And I would see, like if for some reason everybody was leaving, yes, I think there'd definitely be great value in getting something on the book to make sure that we're informing that next cohort of members. But again, I think we're very fortunate to have Representative Chang, who will be able to continue shepherding this work forward. And that's just an observation that I have, given this committee's makeup. Yes, some of you all are leaving, but not everyone.
So one thing that I want to just name as a question is timing, right? There is timing of the board shifting in its makeup, and there is timing of when this task force actually starts. So if I may, I think where I would appreciate this committee's help is in making sure that we have a united voice, less so to more so, right? More productive for me would be if I can go to the task force and say, here are the things that we agree on as a board. Where I struggle is what level of analysis to do that at, because it feels
Well, if I could just say this, I mean, if you could sort of bow it down, what it is you want to be able to bring to the task force, that could be the good makings of a resolution. The problem is, you'll go into the new term, this task force is going to be meeting, and to some extent, you're going to have a brand new board. And, most of the things that we have done, it's hard to get them, it's not a short process. I mean, the example of the teacher turnover, that's something that started in my first term. And look where we are. We got something done on the report card that also started in my first term. So I'm just saying, let's not lose that momentum. Let's not lose knowledge. Let's not lose the commitment, so that you have to go forward with it. That's really all but I'm up for whatever you find useful. I've clearly failed in trying to figure out how to put that onto paper in a useful way. But I think if we can find a way, that would be very helpful to you.
okay. Thank you. So, President Sutter, do you have an update on when the task force might now actually de facto, not de jure, but de facto get started in your last?
Unfortunately, they didn't give us any further details.
Okay.
This whole
All right.
conversation helped me better illuminate what you're trying to accomplish. I apologize if I misunderstood that the goal of this resolution is for the board to codify what its priorities are around literacy, so that you have backing to take with you into the task force. And I would suggest that it would be helpful if we could have a discussion, maybe at our November working session, on ideas that you might want to bring to the board, Alistair, Representative Chang, for that. Or if you feel like it would be helpful for this committee to put something to paper before it came to the full board, to try to do that, discuss it in the November meeting of the committee, and then bring it to the December working session. Because I do not think that the task force is going to begin substantive work before our December working session. I would be very surprised if that happened.
Yes, and I hear that, and I think this is where you're hearing my stream of consciousness around. If we do structured literacy, knowledge, right, and then alignment of standards with curriculum and assessments and training, those are
and screening interventions, I would say, the other ones.
Say that one more time.
Screenings and interventions, like.
Yes, right. Okay, so if we do it at that level of analysis, it feels like I think that could be something that Lauren, for example, could put together quite quickly, because it is stuff that we all agree on. And right, it is something that she will understand as having been a reading instructor. And so I would like us to focus in on the things that we are all on the same page about. And if I may, now thinking out loud, this level of analysis is much more is much more macro, right? But I think it could actually help me name and say, we as the board want these things to be prioritized together, right? And not, right, because my fear also is structured literacy training gets funded without any investments in these other things, which, we now have data on that shows that is not super effective, actually, right? And so to be able to push back and not just say, I, as representative of Ward 2, can cite these research studies to say that alone is not enough, but to say we as a board agree that, if we're going to do this, here's what we've learned from other states is how we can do it right. So if that level of analysis sounds good to the two of you to start, it's that it doesn't end in a specific ask, which I do think is the purpose of this task force, right? To sort out across stakeholders. Right, it doesn't say council should do X yet, but rather, one layer more macro from that. If that level of analysis seems right to the two of you, then I would be, I think it would be really helpful.
I mean, I think that sounds right. The one other thing that I didn't mention that I would say is that in concert with what you're saying, these are the things that we know make sense, is that as we're putting all of this into place, it should be tracked and monitored and researched. I mean, that was the point of the RPP letter. So I would suggest drawing from that as well, to, as part of what should be happening.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're laying out.
Mr. Zhu, is that something that we could get you and Lauren's help to, not for this public meeting, but for the next working session?
Yeah, we'll put it on our list of things. Just note the next working session is November 2nd.
Oh, very soon. Okay.
It's actually very soon. We are literally in a boom, 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 like meeting cadence right now. But the next working session is November 2nd, because
and if it doesn't get done by then, right, I think having it be December 7th so that this board can still vote for it on December 21st, which I assume we're still having that meeting, yes?
that would be the intention. That would be the intention of the
Would
final
still
meeting,
capture
the final meeting.
the board's intentions and work together the last 2 years. Okay, so what I don't want this to be is right, because I think the macro level buckets of structured literacy, let's say decoding plus knowledge, are super macro. What I don't want it to get into is like, and I love both of these, but it's not about getting to the level of like funding school librarians, funding high dosage tutoring, right? That is a level of intervention versus, I think I would like to keep this particular resolution still one layer up.
I agree. I mean, I hope it would include the idea that schools that speedy early intervention is part of what is needed. The ability to do that.
Yep. Okay. So if we all agree there, then I think this will be would be something that this committee could put forward, if not for the next working session, then the one after that. Alex, thank you.
I think President Sutter said this, but if it is for the December working session, that would allow us to bring forward this list or ideas to the next Ed Standards Committee meeting for all of your review.
Got it. Okay.
Which
and I would get emotional at the end of the month to also frame it as, this is something that the makeup of this board has been working on together for 2 years, and I really deeply appreciate that solidarity in this work. So okay, thank you. Any other new business or questions?
Not from me.
Okay, so great. Well, then I will call this meeting to a close and look forward to seeing folks tomorrow in person.
Thank you, Representative Chang.
Bye. See you all tomorrow.
Thank you.